Jim Schwartz went 5-12. Yet reports suggest the Browns may keep him, not just as DC, but possibly as head coach. To Tony Rizzo, this isn't just bad football logic. It's organizational malpractice. Schwartz may be respected in the locker room, particularly by stars like Myles Garrett, but retaining him after such a collapse sends the exact wrong message. Performance doesn't matter. Relationships do. In a league that moves fast and demands results, if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Clinging to a failed defense while ignoring offensive urgency is a catastrophic misread of the moment. With one of the league's worst scoring offenses and Deshaun Watson on his way out, Cleveland has no business elevating continuity over competence. A franchise quarterback like SHEDEUR Sanders won't thrive under a coaching regime built to preserve defensive egos. He needs vision, flexibility, and modern scheming, all things Schwartz has never been known for. Elevating him undercuts any chance of real offensive transformation. If the Browns insist on tethering their future to past missteps, they'll get exactly what they've always had. It should have been a straightforward offseason. 10 NFL teams needed new head coaches. 10. And one by one, they made their moves. The Falcons acted quickly. So did the Titans. The Dolphins, the Giants, they didn't waste time. They found their guys, locked them in, and got to work. Meanwhile, in Berea, the Browns spent 3 full weeks interviewing, deliberating, re-interviewing, and still have nothing to show for it. That's not thorough. That's dysfunction. That's delay disguised as strategy. And the longer it drags on, the more transparent the issue becomes. Enter Tony Rizzo, Cleveland radio's most unfiltered voice, and lately, the only person in local media willing to say the quiet part out loud. His criticism of the Browns' coaching search wasn't just frustration. It was a boiling over of everything that's been wrong with his team's leadership for the last decade. Because when you zoom out, this isn't just a botched hiring process. This is the same cycle repeating itself. And the pattern always starts at the top. Rizzo put the spotlight squarely on Jimmy Haslam. And honestly, where else would it go? The Browns owner has built a reputation for overstepping, second-guessing, and shaping football decisions from the owner's suite. Something no successful franchise tolerates. And yet, in Cleveland, it's the norm. Every coaching search ends with rumors of interference, reports of strong internal voices, and conditions placed on incoming hires. This offseason, same story. Reports are already out there saying Jim Schwartz is being prioritized, potentially even considered for the head coaching job. Let's break that down. Schwartz is currently the defensive coordinator. Last season, the Browns finished 5-12. The offense was dead last in everything that matters, 30th in scoring. The quarterback situation was a mess. The team was lost in every sense. And the guy whose unit saw the field the most might be rewarded with a promotion? That's not a rebuild. That's inertia. That a franchise stuck in place, mistaking familiarity for success. And it gets worse. There are strong suggestions that whoever the Browns hire next might be required to keep Schwartz on staff. That's not autonomy. That's control. That tells every qualified candidate out there that the job comes with fine print, and that the real decisions are happening somewhere above them. It's also yet another sign that GM Andrew Berry may not be the one running the show. Rizzo questioned it openly. How much of this process is Berry's call, and how much is Haslam pulling strings behind the scenes? It's a fair question, because Berry doesn't exactly have a track record of these kinds of delays. And if he's being overruled or boxed in by ownership expectations, what kind of coach could he possibly hire that would survive in this environment? There's also the player factor. Reports suggest that star defensive end Myles Garrett is pushing for Schwartz to stay. And while player input is important, letting it shape staffing decisions is a slippery slope. When one player's opinion begins influencing the entire coaching structure, you lose accountability. You lose chain of command. You turn leadership into a popularity contest. That's not how winning teams operate. That's how locker rooms fracture. The problem isn't just the candidates on the table. It's the conditions surrounding the hire. No top-tier offensive mind is going to take a job where they can't bring in their own staff, can't run their own system, and can't make football calls without checking with ownership. It's the opposite of empowerment. It's an instant deal breaker. Which brings us to the biggest issue of all, the looming opportunity in the 2026 NFL Draft. Whether it's SHEDEUR Sanders or another elite prospect, the Browns could be staring down a franchise-changing decision at quarterback. Deshaun Watson's time looks limited. The offensive output has cratered. And the most valuable asset in football, a young, moldable, dynamic quarterback, is potentially within reach. But developing that kind of player takes more than just drafting him. It takes vision, patience, structure, a coaching staff built for that development, not stapled together with leftover parts. And most of all, it takes a head coach with full control. Someone who can set a tone, build a system, and be the face of the turnaround. Instead, the Browns are moving backward. They're doing what they've always done. Prioritizing defense, restricting the coaching pool with preconditions, and letting internal politics drive football decisions. It's how Baker Mayfield got cycled through schemes. It's how other teams got better, while Cleveland stood still. And it's how you end up squandering quarterbacks who might have thrived somewhere else. Speaking of Mayfield, he's a perfect example. After being tossed aside in Cleveland, he found stability in other organizations and began to flourish again. Same with Sam Darnold. These aren't anomalies. These are reminders that structure matters. That quarterback development doesn't happen in chaos. And right now, Cleveland is chaos. Other teams have shown what successful turnarounds look like. The Lions under Dan Campbell were aggressive. They gave him real authority, let him build a culture, and didn't tie his hands behind his back. Same with Sean McVay in Los Angeles. Same with Kurt Signetti in Indiana. These organizations acted with urgency and vision. They aligned their leadership. They moved. The Browns? They stalled. They hedged. They chose a death-by-committee process that's led to nothing but confusion. And while other teams are installing systems and meeting with players, Cleveland is still arguing over which staff members are off-limits. That's how you lose time. That's how you lose candidates. That's how you fall behind before the season even begins. And every minute wasted in January is a minute you can't get back in September. Rizzo said it best. This is a team that refuses to let football people do football things. And unless Haslam backs off and lets Barry make a real hire with real authority, it won't matter who stands on the sideline, because the structure they're walking into is built to fail. So here we are, a head coaching vacancy still unfilled, a front office that may not be calling the shots, a defensive coordinator being positioned as untouchable despite a losing record, and a future franchise quarterback who could be walking into the same broken system that's ruined others before him. If you're a Browns fan, you've seen this movie too many times. The casting changes, but the plot never does. Fire a coach. Drag out the hiring process. Make a compromised hire. Blame them for systemic issues. Fire them. Repeat. At some point, it's not bad luck. It's bad leadership. And until that changes at the very top, everything else is window dressing. So what do you think? Will the Browns finally break the cycle? Or is this just more the same dressed up as due diligence? Let us know in the comments. Hit like if you're done watching this team stall while the rest of the league passes them by. And subscribe for more unfiltered breakdowns as the off-season drama rolls on. Because if this is what January looks like, you already know what's coming in April. Let's not sugarcoat it. The Browns are blowing it. This was the moment, the crossroads, the opportunity to reset the tone, reset the culture, and reset the direction of a franchise that has been stuck in neutral for years, decades, if we're being honest. And what did they do with it? They hesitated. They delayed. They got in their own way. Again. While the rest of the league is sprinting toward the future, Cleveland is crawling through a swamp of internal politics, vague decision-making, and, at the center of it all, ownership interference that won't go away. Tony Rizzo said it best. The Browns don't have a coaching problem. They have a Jimmy Haslam problem. Because when you look at every single storyline unfolding right now, all roads lead to the same destination. Control. Who has it? Who's really making the calls? And why, after all these years, does it feel like the people actually responsible for building the football team are still being undercut? Andrew Berry was hired to be the architect, the mind behind the roster. But this entire coaching search has exposed something that's been lingering for years. He may not be the one writing the blueprint. The longer this goes on, the clearer it becomes that Jimmy Haslam is still too involved, whether placing conditions on candidates, prioritizing personal favorites, or elevating staff retention above fresh vision. Just look at the Jim Schwartz situation. This isn't about whether he's a good coordinator. It's about what he represents. A team that went 5-12 with a defensive unit that, while occasionally solid, still didn't deliver when it mattered. And yet, somehow he's the focal point of the offseason. He's being floated as a possible head coach. That's not based on results. That's based on internal relationships, comfort, familiarity, all the wrong reasons. And then there's a report that Schwartz might be forced onto the next coach's staff, regardless of who gets hired. That alone should disqualify the process. If you're asking someone to come in and fix this franchise, but you're not willing to give them a clean slate, what are you even doing? No serious coach wants to inherit someone else's staff, especially not from a 5-12 team that ranked 30th in scoring. Speaking of scoring, let's talk offense. Because the numbers don't lie. The Browns were atrocious last season on that side of the ball. Bottom 3 in points per game. A revolving door at quarterback. A completely ineffective system. And now, with the likely departure of Deshaun Watson looming and a potential top draft pick on the horizon, the Browns are, once again, failing to prioritize offensive identity in the most critical moment. This is the time to go get your offensive guy, your culture builder, your quarterback whisperer, the person who can walk into that locker room, take over a broken side of the ball, and create something modern, something sustainable. But instead of speeding toward that future, they're stuck looking over their shoulder. They're trying to make everyone happy. Retain Schwartz. Cater to Myles Garrett's preference. Keep the defense intact. Please ownership. Check 1,000 boxes that have nothing to do with actually winning football games. That's how you blow it. That's how you squander the chance to land and develop someone like SHEDEUR Sanders or any elite quarterback prospect, really. Because quarterbacks need more than talent. They need an ecosystem. And what Cleveland is offering right now is an ecosystem. It's a minefield. No offensive coach is going to want this job if they feel like they're just a figurehead. And no young quarterback is going to thrive under a defensive-first staff that inherited pieces of the last failed regime. We've seen this play out before. It never ends well. Think back to Baker Mayfield. The guy was brought in to save the franchise. But what was around him? Chaos. Coaching changes. Scheme changes. Politics. And in the end, Cleveland gave up on him faster than they built around him. Now he's out there rebuilding his career elsewhere. So is Sam Darnold. So are a dozen other quarterbacks who were never the real problem. The problem was always the environment. You can't build a franchise around a quarterback when you're still building the front office on quicksand. And you'd think, after all these years, all the firings, all the public embarrassment, that Cleveland would have learned that lesson. But here we are again, staring down a massive draft moment with no coach, no clarity, and no sense of urgency. Meanwhile, other teams are installing playbooks. They're scouting. They're locking in offensive systems and identifying a staff they'll use to develop their next quarterback. The Browns? Still holding interviews. Still debating whether or not Jim Schwartz should be untouchable. Let that sink in. This isn't about missing a deadline. This is about missing the moment. And there's a difference, because in today's NFL, timing is everything. The teams that turn things around, Detroit, LA, Indy, they all did it with speed, with decisiveness, with clear direction. The Browns, they're stuck in analysis paralysis. And the only consistent factor? Haslam. The guy's track record is undeniable. Coaches don't last. GMs don't last. Vision doesn't last. Because the second it gets uncomfortable or the media starts asking questions, Haslam steps in and resets the process. That's not leadership. That's meddling. And it's why Cleveland continues to get passed by. And fans are over it. You can feel it, not just in the media coverage, but in every conversation around this team. People are exhausted. They've been promised culture changes before. They've been sold on coaching hires before. And every time, it ends the same way, because the structure never actually changes. You can hire the next genius OC. You can draft the most talented QB on the board. But if you're still dragging all the same dysfunction into the building, the result will never be different. Ever. And the worst part? This isn't even shocking anymore. That's how broken things are. Tony Rizzo's on-air rant didn't just land because it was loud. It landed because it was true. Because he's saying what fans are thinking. The problem isn't just the coaching search. It's that there's no trust that anything meaningful will come out of it. Because ownership has already shown that it can't stay out of the way long enough to let people do their jobs. At some point, you either change the model or you accept the failure that comes with it. The Browns, right now, are choosing failure, choosing delay, choosing comfort over innovation. And they're doing it with a potentially generational quarterback prospect sitting in the distance, watching how they operate. So here's the brutal truth. Unless something dramatic shifts now, unless the Browns hire an offensive coach with full autonomy, give him control of his staff, and start building a real system around the future of this team, then nothing will change. And SHEDEUR Sanders? He'll either end up drafted into chaos or watching from afar while another team swoops in and does things the right way. So what's it going to be, Cleveland? Will this be the off-season where you finally take control of your future? Or just another entry in the long, sad history of missed opportunities and self-inflicted wounds? And if you've been following this team for any length of time, you already know how this ends. That's the worst part. The Browns don't even surprise anyone anymore. They disappoint in the most predictable way possible. And what's unfolding right now with this coaching search? It's not just a mess, it's a rerun. Different off-season, same dysfunction. Let's just say it. The Browns do not understand how the modern NFL works. You don't win by preserving the past. You don't build a contender by promoting from within after a 5-12 disaster. You don't prioritize defensive continuity when your offense was dead last. But here we are, talking about Jim Schwartz as a potential head coach, or worse, a condition placed on whatever poor soul takes this job. That's not building. That's clinging. Clinging to what feels safe. Clinging to internal politics. Clinging to something, anything, that might delay the hard decisions this organization clearly doesn't want to make. And you know what? The league's watching. Not just fans. Not just Tony Rizzo. Not just Cleveland sports media. Everyone is watching how the Browns are handling this hire. Coaches, coordinators, agents, free agents, college prospects. They all see what's happening. And what they see is a franchise more interested in protecting its structure than fixing its problems. No top candidate wants to be handed a defensive coordinator. No coach wants to walk into a quarterback vacuum with no control over staff or scheme. And no young QB, especially someone like SHEDEUR Sanders, is going to develop in a system where the offensive vision is a second-tier concern. Because let's be real, the Browns aren't acting like they're building around a quarterback. They're acting like they're trying to preserve a locker room hierarchy. Let's talk about that locker room. Because the second you allow players, even elite players like Myles Garrett, to start influencing coaching hires, you've lost the plot. You've shifted power away from leadership and into the hands of individuals. That's not culture. That's chaos waiting to happen. It's great to have player input. But when that input starts guiding major decisions, you're no longer operating like a football team. You're operating like a popularity contest. And that's exactly what Rizzo was calling out. Loudly. Desperately. Because this is the exact pattern that's kept the Browns stuck in the basement of the league for years. This was supposed to be the turning point. The fork in the road. You fire a coach. You hit reset. You go find someone who can lead an offense, build an identity, and prepare your roster for what's coming. A top draft pick, a new quarterback, a new era. But instead of resetting, the Browns are recycling. Recycling old schemes, old staff, old philosophies that already failed. They're conducting a coaching search not to empower someone, but to negotiate with them. Sure, you could be our head coach, but only if you agree to these terms and don't touch Schwartz and maybe don't change too much too fast. What kind of coach wants that? What kind of leader accepts that? Not the kind you build a franchise around. And here's the deeper issue. This all feeds into a culture of fear. Fear of change. Fear of strong leadership. Fear of losing control. That's why Jimmy Haslam keeps putting his fingerprints on football operations. Because he doesn't trust the process. He doesn't trust his own hires. And it shows every single offseason. What happens when you operate from fear? You get tentative hires, half measures, coaches who don't fit the moment. You get organizational hesitation, where no one wants to make the bold call because they're not sure they have the authority to make it. You get what the Browns are doing right now, analysis paralysis. And while they're stuck overthinking every move, the rest of the league is evolving. Teams are empowering head coaches. They're building systems around quarterbacks. They're aligning the front office, coaching staff, and ownership into a single, unified vision. You think Dan Campbell is making playbook decisions with ownership approval? You think Sean McVay had to negotiate his staff before taking a Rams job? Absolutely not. And that's the difference. That's why those teams turn things around. Because they're not trying to keep everyone happy. They're trying to win. Cleveland? They're trying to appease. That's the word. Not lead. Not build, not innovate. Appease. Appease the defensive veterans. Appease the front office. Appease the owner. Appease the fan base with headlines instead of actual progress. And somehow, in all of that, the most important piece of the puzzle, the offense, gets pushed to the background. Again, it's inexcusable because they don't have time to waste, whether it's SHEDEUR Sanders or someone else. The Browns are walking into a critical window. Quarterbacks don't develop on hope. They develop with structure. And the Browns are squandering that chance right now by not having a head coach, by entertaining defensive continuity over offensive vision, and by putting conditions on a job that should be a full reset. The reality? Any coach worth having is going to look at this and say no. Not because the roster is bad, not because the fans aren't loyal, but because the environment is broken. You can't fix the offense if you're not allowed to touch the defense. You can't build a new staff if you're being handed holdovers from a failed season. You can't turn around a culture if the locker room is making decisions before you do. And unless the Browns completely overhaul this approach, they're going to do what they've always done. Hire someone desperate enough to take the job under bad terms, burn them out in 2 years, and hit the reset button all over again. At what point does that cycle stop? Tony Rizzo wasn't just ranting. He was pleading with his franchise to finally stop spinning its wheels, to stop operating from fear, to stop repeating the same process with new names. Because this was the off-season where they could have finally done it right, finally led with vision, not compromise. But that window is closing fast. So now the question isn't even who they hire. It's, will it even matter? Because unless the Browns empower the next coach fully with no strings and give them the tools to rebuild this offense from the ground up, nothing's going to change. And if nothing changes, then we already know what's next. A wasted draft, a wasted quarterback, a wasted year, another press conference, another apology, another, we thought this was the right direction at the time. And Browns fans, they're not buying it anymore. So what's your take? Do you think this is the offseason where things finally change? Or is it just another rerun of Cleveland's greatest hits? The coaching search nobody asked for, defensive coordinator, the franchise savior, and ownership meddles again? Drop your thoughts below. Like the video if you're just tired of being stuck in this cycle. And subscribe if you want every update on what's quickly becoming another offseason meltdown in real time. Because let's be honest, if this is how the Browns handle January, you already know what September's going to look like.